In previous chapter, we learned that REST is an architectural principle. In this chapter, we will learn what are those architecture principles. Mr. Roy in his dissertation has given an exhaustive list of these principles. Here we will discuss only those which are important. The first and most important is addressable resource. In the world of REST, each resource has an address, and that address is maintained by URI, Uniform Resource Identifier. Now that's easy to understand. Whenever you have to open a web page, you type URI in the browser and hit enter, which in turn calls an HTTP method to get information from server. This brings the second REST architectural principle, which is limited uniform interface. In REST, we use only HTTP methods, which are of course very limited in number. In fact, almost all services can be covered by only 4 most popular methods. They are get, put, delete, and post. There are some less popular methods also, like head and option. We will talk about these methods in detail in upcoming lectures. But what I want to emphasize here is that the interface of REST web service has very limited number of operations because it uses only HTTP methods. There are several advantages of using only HTTP methods. For example, HTTP methods are already very popular and familiar. Most of the programming languages will have HTTP client library, so you don't need to get the stub of web service the way you do in SOAP. And if you are thinking how come these 4 or 5 methods can be sufficient for writing all different type of services, think about SQL. There you have only 4 operations: select, insert, update, and delete. But as you know that these operations are sufficient to do all possible operations in SQL. The next is representational transfer of resource state. When you open any website, say facebook.com, you think that you actually get the resource of server in the form of HTML. But let us correct it. You don't get a resource, you actually get a state of the resource. Because you open same URI after 1 hour, you will see new information, which means that the state of the resource has changed. So according to this principle, when a client submits a request, then server transfers the state of resource in a representation which can be understood by the client. In the case of browser, it should be HTML, but there can be other representations also, as we will learn later, like JSON and XML. Next is hypermedia as the engine of application state, HATEOS. It may sound complex, but actually it is very easy to understand because we use this feature every day. When you buy something using an e-commerce website or you do internet banking, you can see that you follow the links to complete your process. For example, if you are buying something, you will click the link of the category of items that you want to buy. That link can be a text or an image or even a video. Suppose you want to buy electronics, you will click on electronics link. You will get a list of electronics items and maybe a link saying more items. If you don't find your item in this list, you will click more items and you will get an extended list. Then you select your item, you get a checkout button, then you get a form to fill your banking information, then you are asked to confirm and you complete the process. Here what is happening is that you are following links to complete your process. You don't need to get all the information in the first request itself. The website itself will guide you to navigate through the entire process. And this is possible with the help of hyperlinks, graphics, audio, video, or any type of link which you are interested in and clicking to go to the next page. These different type of links are called hypermedia. So you see that hypermedia is the engine for you to navigate through different application states. If you are confused between hypertext, hyperlink and hypermedia, don't worry, as you know that hyperlink is a link which takes you to another page. Any text having hyperlink is called hypertext, and hypermedia is the extension of hypertext which includes other types of media also apart from text like image, audio, video, etc. The next principle is caching. You might be knowing that caching is the process of storing information either at the client side or some other storage which is having less load compared to server, so that we can reduce the load on server. We will talk in details about when we can use caching and when we cannot use caching in upcoming lectures. The next is stateless. Every request is isolated. Server should not depend on any information of the previous request to process a request. Stateless does not mean that your application cannot have a state. Of course it can have a state, but that state should be maintained at the client side and not at the server side. So in this lecture, we have briefly covered REST architecture principles. In upcoming lectures, we will discuss these principles in detail.